Please help me welcome Rhonda Reeves.
Thank you, Camille. That was a mouthful. Thank you for that formal introduction. Recently, I had an informal introduction that was awesome. This woman who is a colleague of mine at one of our industry association meetings, she wanted me to meet a college student who was going into my profession. And she simply said vehemently, "This is Rhonda. She really knows her stuff." I was like, best intro ever. Thank you. She might have oversold a bit, but at least it was a great compliment. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, as we said, on this rainy, muggy day. Today, what I'd like to share with you is a subject that you may not have that much familiarity with. It's Innovating Impact, 6 blended design elements that drive real business outcomes. Whew, that's a mouthful, right? What that means is what I'm going to provide for you is an easy 6-step formula to help you create learning experiences that are delivered using blended design, which you're going to learn about today. Now, this is useful for learning professionals in talent careers, but it's also useful for entrepreneurs, professional speakers. Becky, I know that you wanted to put together a learning product for your business. This can help you get there. That's the beauty of blended learning. But before we even go into blended learning and blended design, I first have to set the landscape because you don't know what you're dealing with yet. All right, so the world of training and development has transformed not over just the past 50 years, but even over the past 5 years. So in our profession, we no longer refer to it as training. Instead, we call it learning. Now, unless it's something that's technical, athletic, or very formal, they will still call it training, they'll still call it instructional design. But we call it learning. And why do we do that? Because training happens from the perspective of the trainer. And learning happens from the perspective of the learner. And that's the science that we're interested in finding out. We want to understand how human beings learn. Because when you help people learn, you help them change. Now, so what happened due to this transformation was that our nomenclature has changed. Besides the training and learning, we're also, like I said, learning designers instead of instructional designers. That changed the whole science then of how we look at learning and learning design. So now we had to study things like neuroscience and psychology, multitudes of learning theories, adult learning principles, human performance technology, multimedia design, and more, plus instructional design. So we had to move from mere content creation to now thinking about how do you present and deliver and chunk and align information for human beings to really make sense of it and associate it with things that then they can go and act differently on. Totally different science than it was 50 years ago. So I guess really the most recent transformation within like the past 5 years has come with the advent of technology, of course. So these are things in the learning field like adding learning experience platforms. You might have formerly heard of a learning management system, an LMS. Those are out and gone. Sure, there's lots of companies that still have them because they invested a great deal in that asset and they're hugely expensive. We just did it with Toastmasters, but it also incorporates some of the newer principles, and that's with something called a learning experience platform. So that's one of the new learning technologies, and within that, it holds something called machine learning. What the heck is machine learning? That's like when you go on Amazon and the machine learns, oh, well, you purchased this last time, Rhonda, so you must want this too. That's where it's going with learning, which is much more organic and natural with us as human beings. We've become consumers of learning. We go on LinkedIn and it tells you, oh, well, you'll want this. And Amazon is another case. So now learning experience platforms, or LEPs, are copying that experience so that it comes to us much more fluidly. And we can choose which way we want to go at the same time. So we have many more paths to learning instead of just a click, click, click e-learning module that's already very defined. and just not very exciting for a lot of people. So you have to have experiences. That's a great thing about Toastmasters, is that you have an experience that's part of that LMS. So you're not just relying on the technology, which is where we get into trouble inside learning. So one of the problems with the addition of all these new technologies, in my field, everybody gets distracted. They go, oh, cool, a new tool, or I've got this new app and it's awesome. But it's important not to get distracted. Many times in the learning profession, we think new learning technologies equals new and better learning. Well, about a few years ago, I don't know, about 10 years ago, there was a little girl who was 6 years old. And even though she was all set, anatomically, physiologically, neurologically, psychologically, and intellectually, she had all the proper workings to be able to form words and speak. Yet she wouldn't. Not at home with her family and not in school with her kindergarten class. So the teacher gave her a tablet to help her learn to speak. And on that tablet, she could select words or images like cat or ball in order to help her communicate with her class and her teacher. The little girl loved the tablet. And she had so much fun because prior to the tablet, she was a very shy and quiet girl. So she had no friends. She didn't speak, so she had no friends. But now with this fancy technology in her hand, she became the most popular and interesting girl in class. All the kids wanted to talk to her and see what she would reply back on the fancy machine. So the little girl, the mom, the teacher were all very pleased with the results. But I want to ask you, was this a success?
No.
Why not, Tammy?
Because what I'm envisioning, I don't know the story, obviously, but what I'm envisioning is that the little girl, that the machine talked for her. She still never communicated. I could be wrong.
Anybody agree or disagree?
To me, you have to have learning by doing. There was no actual learning by doing. Everything was kind of like what Tammy was saying. It's pre-done, and there was no interaction of any sort, kind of like an after effect. I mean, she's not actually learning anything.
Exactly. And many of the empirical evidence documents that came out were saying, oh yeah, she learned. She didn't learn, because you're right, she didn't do any of the actual speaking. I mean, people may argue, but she did communicate with some words or thoughts. Yes, she did. Simple one-word responses. And only if those one-word responses were available on her machine, whereas other kids her age were telling stories and singing songs and doing show and tell and sharing about who they wanted to be when they grew up. Very complex thoughts and ideas. So now the technology actually impeded her growth, because with the machine, she was popular, she had friends, and without it, she'd have to go back to being her same old shy and silent self. So the point of this story, and I'm glad you got it, is to remember not to get distracted by technology and put all of our eggs in the technology basket. And like you said, you learn by doing, and that's the beauty of a blended design. Blended learning calls for the learner to have some control over pace, place, or path. And a blended design pulls from the different delivery techniques out there, and you can use whatever makes sense for you, combine them in a way then that makes sense, that aligns to the context of your business, your audience, your constraints that you have, and your goals. So some of the different delivery techniques available might be purely online. Not a favorite of that. It rarely works. I've seen it with our business audiences. For my business audience at NOB, that doesn't work. They're not excited by that. There might be some people who have lots of time at home or at work, and so they can do that all day long. There isn't a great deal of depth in that type of learning. So then another delivery technique might be that you have discussion like this. If you're sitting around and having a peer discussion, or that you're talking to somebody else. So you have social learning components. You might have an online discussion forum. Even that is involving somebody else. So now we've got some social collaboration going on. We see this with Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and all this. We learn from each other when we reply and comment, right? That's a way of learning. So that's what I want to transform with everybody, is that learning is not so formal. We learn every single day. You go on YouTube, you learn something. You might learn that this is a really stupid thing, or this is hilarious, right? I will never do that with my cat or my children, you know. But still, you've learned something. And so that's the beauty of learning and blended learning design. Now, within an organization, you have to have business impact. And why do we care about business impact? I know formerly in organizations and businesses, learning designers in the learning department, L&D, they didn't care about business impact. The only impact that we had to show was high satisfaction ratings on our happy sheets. And we still can fall into this in Toastmasters, so we have to be careful. That's not real impact. And in a business, if we're not having real impact, why keep us? So business outcomes and impact are essential to your existence. You have to remember that. And you have to think about your audience. Why should they care? What's in it for them when you create some type of learning product? You have to remember that the greater purpose of learning inside an organization, inside your personal organization, the greater purpose is to drive change. Learning equals change. Because think about it, when you learn something, you change either a knowledge set, what you know, or you change a skill set, what you can do, or a mindset, what you believe. Those are the changes that happen when you are experiencing learning. So we're change ambassadors within an organization. They don't call us that, but I know that that's my job. That's what I do every single day in conversation and also in delivery of different models. So business impact is essential, and that's what I kind of based some blended learning products that I've created within my organization on. So let me give you a little background about what a traditional versus a blended approach would look like. In an organization, a traditional is going to be something that's assigned. Probably if you've been in an organization, a manager has assigned you, you need to go and do this training. You need to attend this. That's fine for compliance. If it's something that you have to certify in or has to do with safety, that's great. You need that. And you need to keep a record of that, and that can be done on an LMS. But for adults, the way we want to look at, the way we want to experience our learning is we want it to be self-directed. We don't want somebody else telling us, this is what you have to learn now. Also, in the past, the traditional has been a formal classroom. And now, if you've got control over pace, place, and path, maybe you're doing some pieces at home or while you're traveling and it's on your mobile app, then it's very informal. You no longer are sitting in kind of a very formal setting. Also, synchronous versus asynchronous. Synchronous means the learning event happens at the same time for everyone, not with blended. Because if you're doing an online piece, you can do that anywhere, anytime that works for you. So now I have control. Also, the past is very prescriptive. We know exactly what is going to happen within that learning. Now it's constructive, meaning me as the learner, I construct my own learning experience based on the experiences and the associations that I bring to whatever the content is. In the past, it's also a hassle. There's travel, there's time. You can't do anything else. When you go back, you have a burden at work. But yet with blended, it's distance delivered. So you do it in the context of work. So you just do a little bit a day or a little bit a week. I've designed mine to be 2 to 4 hours per week. How they split up those 2 to 4 hours, I don't care. And it's not all online. That's the whole experience. It's 2 to 4 hours. Also, in the past, we've just had lecture. This would not be my normal way to deliver learning by just speaking at you. But I'm trying to help you understand a concept. And so sometimes that's the way we need to get it out. But in blended learning, there's multiple modes, meaning you can watch or listen to something, a podcast. There could be a lecture, and then there's also experiences that you have. So we have action learning projects where they actually have to experience it and come up with a result. Also, traditional happens on top of work. I always hear this, or at least in the past, when people would say, oh, I have to go to this learning program. First of all, it should never be forced. If it's not the right time for you, don't do it. There's no point. And it shouldn't feel like a burden, like it's on top of work, but that's how the traditional models feel, because you have that hassle of going back and now you've got all this other stuff to do. So it's always an extra thing that sits on top of your work, whereas with blended, it's underneath, because again, it should be happening in the context of work. I like to marry my blended models with something that's a benefit that's in it for them, or the business. So if we need, in the business, if we need to move innovation forward, how people innovate, then that's going to be part of the process. And I'll show you how I did that in a little bit. Also in traditional, it's just a superficial practice. Can you give me the time, Max? I don't see it.
15:38.
Okay. Can you just show that to me so I can keep track? I can't see that. Thank you.
Okay.
So in a traditional product, you might have very superficial practice. So you'll get some practice within the class event. There's always a learning event. But with blended, it's an ongoing thing. So it's real practice because you're really applying it. If you give somebody some type of training program, Becky, in your field, they'll actually be working with the student. And then they have a real experience and real things to report back. It's not superficial, it doesn't happen just in the event. So then they can really learn how to help people through that process. Also, it's difficult to scale when it's, when it's traditional, because let's say you have an audience of 4,000 managers inside an organization that you want to reach with a blended event, or with a traditional event, a learning event. That could take years to get to that 4,000 because you can only have basically 25 to 30 people. It's a huge cost. You got to bring people in if you want it in a certain place. Whereas blended's easy to scale. Everybody can do it at the same time on their own. And there might be some pieces that you can divide up in different locations so that everybody's having the same type of experience, but maybe not the same trainer, because that's not the important part. The focus is not on us, but on them. Also in the past, it's been very exclusive. Only this group of high potentials will be trained. Whereas now it can be inclusive. So, for example, inside my organization, I put together a blended product that's focused on business case development. And then put it out to the businesses, to the HR VPs of our different segments and say, hey, put it out to your people and see which people in the business might want to improve this skill. Because think about it, anytime we sell anything in the organization, we have to present a business case, either informal or formal. You're going to have to sell somebody on why you need some kind of extra time, extra people, or extra money. Maybe you want to even switch business models entirely and you have a good idea. So that would be a good place to maybe, hey, I could go to this. I may not be high potential, but who cares? That's not the point. If you want to improve that gap, you can. And that's the first part about wanting to improve. That's part of an adult learning principle, somebody who has readiness to learn. That's the things that you have to consider when you're putting together your blended products. You have to make sure that the people you're capturing are in a place where they're ready to learn. If they're not, let them go. It's okay. And sometimes the way you do that is by presenting the gap to them, what they don't know. And then see if that's painful for them. If it's, find the pain points. If you find the pain point for that audience, then you can figure out what you need to present. So other things, they're self-directed, like we said before. Also, adults, unlike children, so part of the transformation of learning design, I know this is going super fast, but part of the transformation of learning design is that we decided we need to help people at different stages in their life learn differently. So there's pedagogy for children and andragogy for adults. All this, andragogy, is adult learning principle. And that's where you have to include these things. If you're teaching to, or if you're helping people learn that are adults, you have to keep these things in mind. You can't talk down to them like they're children. You can't wag your finger. You can't assign them things. You just can't do that. We are grown-ups, and nobody likes being treated that way. We also have a wealth of experience to bring to it. So you have to give them opportunities to share that experience and connect their prior experiences to the learning that you offer. There also has to be an immediate application. What's in it for me? Now, some people get confused with immediate, thinking it has to be right now. There might be someone who says, you know what, I want to be a millionaire in 5 years. And so they go to some kind of training and they figure out, okay, well then these are the things that I need to do. So they will take some time to do those things in order to get to that goal. Still, there's an immediate need. And then they're also internally motivated and problem-centered versus content-centered, which I think you've already gotten that. So in front of you, you have this one-page design. And if you think you might want to create a learning income stream, so this is for entrepreneurs, then you can start to write things in this box as I explain it. So the first place where you're going to start is with your business need. What's the business need? Well, in my company, and then once you're going to name it, you're going to check for alignment. Is that really important? And is there a learning gap? So here's my example. I created that business case development program, and the reason that I created it was because in 2017 I listened to an earnings call from the CEO, and he said to everyone, the analysts in the organization, everyone must innovate. And I thought, well, crap, we don't know how to do that. Like, I know the audience, we don't necessarily know how to do that. What does that mean? How do we innovate? And so I started just breaking it apart and thinking, well, one of the things we need to do then is to be able to present a business case. And that process can be very difficult, but very thorough. It requires due diligence. And so inside our organization, I started looking at the different content sources that we have, which is the next piece. So inside any organization, and you'll have to decide if you're an entrepreneur, what is the content source that you're going to use in order to share with people? Because you have to have some piece of content. Only about 10% needs to be content. 20% relationships, people, and 70% experience. That's the 70-20-10 model. So 90% of it is actually doing, and only 10% is the old traditional sit in the classroom and learn something. So with the content source, what I found in my organization, I decided I want something that's quality assured. I had to select it, chunk it, mine, and align. I'll explain that in a minute. So inside my organization, we already had an asset called Harvard Managed Mentor, or HMM, a Harvard online learning tool. Part of my job as an employee is to leverage the assets we have. So on that, one of the topics is business case development. I knew that our people would not sit through the 7 topics and 7 units on this online learning just by itself, and they wouldn't learn anything. So I broke it up, I chunked it into 7 different units, or in this case, 7 different weeks. In some of my other programs, 1 unit is 2 weeks long, or 3 weeks, depending on what the learning experience is. And then I just had to align it with other parts of their learning experience. So if they're learning how to present, if part of the lesson is learn how to present a business case, then they're going to actually present a business case. That's going to be that part of the experience. Thank you, Max. So that's that part. The next thing is you have to think about the support tools. How are they going to actually practice it? What happens on Harvard Managed Mentor is there's a gold mine in these worksheets that nobody knows about for some reason. Worksheets, tools, assessments, articles, and it shows the latest in each practice, whatever the topic is. And so I selected some tools like the presentation piece. There was a visual that had the 7 slides that you need for a business case. Because I know some of the business cases that I've seen, some of the presentations, people have 30 slides because they're technical. No, there are 7 slides. That's all you need. That's the max that you need in order to make your case. Also, the idea of story as part of a presentation, people don't necessarily think of. And so you give them these types of practices and these tools to help give them that knowledge of what to do. And then they go and apply it. So in mine, I used a business case template, which takes 7 weeks for them to complete that because they actually have to go and apply each section. They also pulled out a risk assessment that I know people in the organization said, we have never done assessment of risk in this way. It's never gone this deeply before. You could also do a mind map, perhaps. It just depends on what it is, what your learning is. And then the next piece is reflection. So what you have are 3 components of your learning program. You have learn, practice, reflect. Those are the 3 components you have to have. Learn, that's where the content's going to be. The practice are the tools that they're going to go and apply somewhere. And then the reflection. They have to self-reflect and reflect with others. One piece that sometimes these blended programs forget is social collaboration. They need a peer group. That's the fun when you go to a class. That's what people miss most, is that, I get to see these people and share and learn about what they do in the business and those types of things. So I give that to them on a very small scale. Instead, we split up the class into small groups and we have face-to-face discussions. If they're in Houston, for others calling in, they can call in. We also have a remote line where they can call in, but they're participating in the discussion. It's not just listen in on a webinar. It's a peer discussion. And we talk about each week them applying the content and how it went. And then there's also a weekly manager reflection and feedback session. So I've seen some online groups, some entrepreneurs do this with feedback on Facebook. That's one way that they do it. They might have some other mechanism too that they use in order to get feedback with each other, the people experiencing the same problem, or also with you, Becky, if you're the subject matter expert. And then the next piece is business application. You take those tools and you apply it to the business. And you've got to have metrics in place for whatever it is, and talk about the benefits to the business. So let's see. In my example, these are real testimonies from the business case development program that I put together. These are real things that happened. So this is real business impact that I can go to my CEO and go, look, we're starting to make a difference, right? We're putting a dent in things. So all kinds of things, because everybody worked on different business cases. So there was revenue savings or cost savings or labor, safety issues improved, things like that. There was one gentleman who studied the RFID technology and putting that on landmines. He figured, because his problem was that people were allowing for drops to happen from the height of these rigs. And that can be very dangerous. Not only can you hurt or kill people, but it's also a litigation concern for our company, because the customer who is supposed to inspect it can say, oh, well, I inspected it. But if you have an RFID chip up there that people have to go and scan, that means they have to look at the actual products and make sure all the components are tightly in place and those types of things. The only thing he discovered on the way was that we repaint rigs every year because of rust. So the RFID chip was going to be painted over. So that's great. A business case, one of the successes that I told them was that you find out that something won't work. So we don't put a lot of money and time into it, right? Part of your success is killing an idea. And you can do the same thing. Make sure you test things and allow your learners in each space to do that as well. And then I put together a map for them so they had clear instructions. Adults do like clear instructions. You don't have to tell them everything, but they like instructions. What do I do? Where do I do it? How do I do it? When do I do it? And so that's what this gave them. And make sure that you make it fairly simple, and like I said, give direction. So this is an example of type of a syllabus that I put together. You can do it different ways. If online, I've seen it online, different things like you do step 1, step 2, step 3, those types of things. So these are different steps. I always have prompts for our group discussion so they know ahead of time what we're going to discuss. It's not just some general discussion, we're going to go and waste time. They know exactly what they need to bring to it. And then, so this is the design map when it's all put together. You can take them. That's fine. They're taking photos. Yeah, so this is what it looks like when you put it all together. And hopefully you've been able to add some of your own ideas into these little squares. So that is all of learning design and blended design in a nutshell. And the important part that you need to keep in mind is to innovate happen with this. The thing to remember about innovation is it's not about new or different. So you can take the pressure off. You don't have to create something new and different. Innovation is about better. Uber is a taxi company. It's not a new idea, right? Taxis are old. They've been around for years. It's not different. There's still a person in a car that comes and picks you up at your house and takes you where you want to go. But it's better. Because now I get to watch the little man coming to me in his car. And I can see his license, and I can see his picture, and I know how close he is, and I can cancel it if I want. And I don't have to have cash on me. That's awesome. That's even better. So that's why you have to think about learning. Always try to make it better. Don't make it painful for people. Have fun. But at the same time, make sure that they're learning the change that you want to create. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rhonda, for that very informative speech. Didn't realize it was done early. So at this point, we would allow some extra time for the evaluator to complete his evaluation. And during this time, we will have the club presiding officer, Ms. Tammy Gather, to lead in this endeavor.
Thank
We
you.
have an
Thank you.
evaluation sheet.
Woo!
He's still lost in it.
I'm still swimming. How fun, how fun. I
Yeah,
think,
have you? Yeah, this one.
Okay.
I think the group is working. And sir, I'm sorry, you came in. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure, I am Jose Antonio Betancourt.
Oh,
I am the president of Pensadores